Thank you all for coming. Today, Senator Murkowski and I are announcing the first Senate bipartisan campaign finance reform proposal in a decade. Legislation that forces all significant financial contributors and spenders to disclose where money is coming from and going to in real time, and ends the flagrant abuses of federal tax laws by political operatives masquerading as tax-exempt social welfare organizations. Our bill provides no political advantage whatever to partisans. Everybody is treated the same with one exception. The small financial contributor is afforded more confidentiality than the large ones. The legislation is built on the same principles that make our financial markets work. Markets move on information and transparency, and everybody's got to play by the same rules. The need for information and transparency was made clear in the last election cycle with the massive outside spending that took place, much of which was funded through shell organizations where there were untraceable contributors. The $6.3 billion that was spent was the most ever. And by some accounts, more than 30% of the outside spending was funded in secret by undisclosed donors. Nearly 2/3 of 2012 voters, including majorities of Democrats, Republicans, and independents, said that big donors and secret money undermined the democratic process in the last election. So the follow the money proposal that Senator Murkowski and I make today offers a number of important changes that reflect what we have seen as elections and election practices have evolved over the past decade. First, it provides for real-time disclosure so voters know where the money is coming from, especially in the closing days of elections. Right now, the quarterly political reporting system breeds cynicism by allowing a flood of anonymous, late-minute independent spending that people only find out much later than the election. Second, our proposal stops what I believe are really offensive, flagrant abuses of the tax laws that are intended to help charities in America. Bringing the strength of the Internal Revenue Service and the Federal Election Commission together as we do can provide an effective, focused, and an aggressive enforcement effort that's needed to stop the growing abuses by what are essentially so-called social welfare organizations. Our follow the money proposal requires any entity, regardless of their tax status, to identify the funders of any political activity they engage in. If an organization is not engaged in independent election-related activity, no reporting requirements trigger. The Follow the Money Act makes sure that no political actor is left out. By focusing on political activity rather than trying to define the wide cast of characters that try to influence elections, the Follow the Money Act preemptively closes loopholes that those who seek to anonymously influence elections are certain to seek out, and the reason we say it is that's been the history of campaign law. In addition to empowering the IRS and the Federal Election Commission to better enforce campaign laws, this legislation ensures a consistent enforcement regime that spans both agencies. And if the IRS and the Federal Election Commission can't agree, because we've seen them essentially go back and forth and sort of look at each other, we include a trigger to make sure they do act, where Treasury would be made responsible for sorting out the differences and creating a single set of definitions and rules for the first time. Finally, the Follow the Money Act builds on what are called the stand by your ad provisions, which I authored on a bipartisan basis with Senator Collins in 2002. There's no reason corporations, unions, 501c4 organizations, and any and all who are funding election ads shouldn't be held to the same transparency standards as candidates, as Senator Murkowski and myself and everyone who's running for office. I don't think I could have a better partner in this effort. We've been at this. We're kind of walking back the calendar for pretty much the last year. And let me just turn it over to Senator Murkowski.
Well, thank you. And Senator Wyden, I think, has outlined here today what the meat of the proposal is. And I want to start my comments by acknowledging that what you're seeing in this proposal that is different than you have seen in the Disclose Act that was before the Senate last summer and then prior to, is this is a bill that is designed to be bipartisan. This is a bill that is designed to be even across the board, absolutely transparent in all aspects of it. And I think because of how we have designed it, I think you have an opportunity for success with this legislation because of how we have approached the issue itself. We actually started talking about this last summer in an effort to really try to figure out how can we build a campaign disclosure bill, a set of laws that is applied equally. Because I think if you go back to where we were with the Disclose Act, you had criticisms on all sides. It was going to give an unfair advantage to the labor unions, the Republicans declared. And on the other side, the folks were saying, well, it's going to give an unfair advantage to some of your, for instance, whether it be the NRA, because it allows for a loophole for memberships. Well, what we've done is we looked to all the objections. We looked to how the Disclose Act was set up and said, we don't want to go there. Because it's not my intention, I don't think it's Senator Wyden's intention, that anybody gets an unfair advantage. It's even Steven across the board. And maybe that's where we'll have the opposition to this bipartisan proposal. Because it is going to make a little more work for some who have enjoyed the benefits of anonymity, who have enjoyed the benefits of not having to disclose, who have enjoyed the benefits of a tax code that is really sheltering them from the need to be open and full and complete in your disclosure. So we've got a different proposal out there that really does focus on improving the transparency of our campaigns by bringing that money out of the shadows. If someone wants to be a major player in this political process, they don't get that anonymity that they presently receive. The public will be able to get that real-time information that is critical. We level that playing field by requiring all independent spenders play by the same rules. The rules are the same for everyone, whether you're wealthy, whether you're the well-organized funders, the tax-exempt social welfare organizations. So what we've done is by focusing on the activity itself, on political activity, rather than trying to define the characters, as Senator Wyden has said, we struggled with that. You find out that's not the way to approach it. The way to approach it is to focus on the political activity itself. So we closed those loopholes. We closed those loopholes ahead of time by those who would seek to hide from any level of disclosure. And again, I think when you look to what Senator Wyden and I are proposing today, there is no reason that this bipartisanship that you see standing before you today should not extend to other members of the Senate, that it should not enjoy support on the House side. This is exactly what I think the public has been asking for when they're saying, what's going on within the campaign sphere that allows an individual or an organization to engage in what they all have made the assumption is election activity, federal election activity. And yet there is an anonymity out there that they don't understand. Well, what we're trying to do, again, is bring about transparency, bring about a truly even playing field, and to meet the concerns of the public when it comes to how campaign dollars are raised and how they are spent. So I'm proud to stand with my colleague today. You usually see us in this room and over in Dirksen talking about energy. We're branching out, pushing outside of that mold into the brave new world of campaign disclosure, and it's good to be there with my colleague.
Softball questions, welcome.
Senator, do you do anything about the volume of money? Would a donor still be able to put $700,000 into a super PAC that then spends that money to get you elected?
It treats the big donors, those that effectively, if you want to give $1 million, you can give $1 million, but there is disclosure. There is no way around the disclosure. So if you are a small donor, if you're less than the $1,000, and our legislation does raise that disclosure requirement level from the current FEC requirement of 200 to now 1,000. So if you're below 1,000, you're exempt from the disclosure. If you're above, you're disclosing.
And of course, the Supreme Court has said that you can't place those kinds of limits. So the question, is voters don't want to be detectives. They want to know who's contributing, and they want to know it at a crucial time before they make election decisions. And Senator Murkowski, as both of us have indicated, we felt that what happened in kind of past debates is people were sort of talking past each other. One group said, well, we want to deal with this group, but not that. We said all actors, all major spenders, and all major donors are brought under this tent. And the reality today, particularly with the availability of online communications, and we have credit card contributions under this. They have to be made available essentially within 48 hours. Checks a little bit longer, but it's going to be a new day where voters are actually going to be able to see where money is coming from and going to before they exercise the franchise.
Senator Peter Overby, NPR. What have you been saying to your colleagues in the Republican conference, and what kind of support do you see coming for this bill?
Well, this is an issue, I think, that all of us here in the Senate, we've all had to go through an election. Some of us have been the beneficiary of some of these independent expenditure activities. Some of us have been on the receiving end of some pretty directed campaigns that haven't helped us in that effort. So you kind of come at it from both perspectives. And I think there is a recognition that the system out there, as it is currently set up, doesn't give the public the information that they would hope, nor does it give the candidate the information that they would hope. And so as much pushback as there may have been by members on the Republican side of the aisle when it came to the Disclose Act, I think part of that opposition was due to the fact that they felt that that particular measure was tipped in favor of some of the entities that were out there, and they weren't about to go for it. So again, what we have designed is something that is applicable across the board. It is a uniform set of rules. So I have had discussions with colleagues not only on the Republican side of the aisle, but the Democrat side of the aisle. And is this going to be easy? No. Is this going to be necessary? Yes.
Peter, I'd only like to second what Senator Murkowski has said, because both of us have had senators from both political parties approach us and ask us about what we're working on. We basically kicked this off back in December. We wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post. We asked for public input, so this has been percolating around, and we're both encouraged by the fact that senators of both parties are coming up to us. I just visited a little bit ago with Sheldon Whitehouse, for example, who chairs the Democratic Caucus Task Force on Campaign Finance. He, like the other senators, is very interested in all the efforts that can be made in order to bring together bipartisan support for the very reasons that Senator Murkowski is talking about, in that the current system doesn't work for anybody. It's taking a toll on the credibility of our political process. Senators, often talk among themselves about this whole issue, and particularly now as we've gone to these 501c4s where there's no disclosure at all. Senators of both political parties think this is broken, and we think we're coming along at the right time in order to develop.
I want to add one thing to what Senator Wyden has just mentioned, and that's the process with which we took to get where we are today. We did not sit down, I didn't sit down, draft a bill, and go to Senator Wyden and say, hey, join me on this. We are really trying to be as open and transparent in building this legislation as we are with the intent of the legislation itself. The fact that we put a white paper out there at the end of the year and really solicited input. We were the ones that posited a series of questions saying, give us feedback on this. Is this the right area? When we started this, the numbers that we were using in terms of the minimum disclosure requirements changed. We took that input, and it has been a very collaborative, transparent process to date. So, little segue there.
One of the questions you talk about for registration requirements, receiving $10,000 or more in funds from donors that are earmarked by the donor or the recipient. If I'm a company, I give $50,000 or $100,000 or $1 million to a group like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, or I'm an independent group and I try to give $50,000 to a labor union to spend, but I don't earmark it for ads. I say, here this goes, because money's fungible. What's the guarantee that will be disclosed? How is that disclosed? And also, we saw, especially in the last race, Revs LLC and RTHHQ LLC, and even WSPAN, these LLCs that sprung up only to give $1 million or so, disappeared, and we had no idea who funded it. How do you make sure that the real source of that money is disclosed?
Go ahead.
I think what you described fits our definition of politically related activity. And let me just kind of outline it. I mean, I'm not sure I followed all the specifics of your example, but the bill requires a comprehensive disclosure of independent federal election-related activity. There's money coming out, and money coming in, and money going out. And we define independent federal election-related activity as an expenditure, which is almost always money, made by any person for the purpose of influencing the selection or the nomination or election of any individual by a person or an entity who's independent of the candidate. And I'll probably have to unpack later some of the specifics of your example, but it sure sounds like what you asked meets the definition Senator Murkowski and I are talking about of independent federal election-related activity, and that money would have to be disclosed.
When I think, too, just to add on here, I'll repeat again, it doesn't matter who you are, but what it is that you do. And so as Senator Wyden has outlined, if what you're doing is designed to play in an election, either through advertisement or through fundraising, polling, messaging development, delivery of the message to the voter, then it doesn't make any difference what design you are, whether you're an LLC or whether you're an Indian tribe, a 501c3, it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't matter who you are, it matters what you do. And if you are engaged in federal independent expenditures, federal election-related activity, that's where you go. You mentioned the registration aspect and what happens then, who's held accountable. That's one of the components of this bill. Right now, the way our system is, you can have not necessarily a fictitious person, but a person who's here today gone tomorrow and there's nobody that is held accountable. We require, with the registration, basically it's akin to a registered agent that is on the hook, if you will. They are responsible along with that treasurer. So there is accountability there, even beyond that election, when that organization may have gone poof.
Why don't we take maybe one more? Tom, why don't you? And then I will tell you about the special bonanza you have associated with this cause. This is a bill that is under 50 pages.
Yeah.
So there's a special perk. Tom, go ahead.
Would any communication which mentioned a candidate or an incumbent fit your definition of for the purpose of influencing an election? In other words, if organization mentioned Senator Murkowski, if you were up for election, if it mentioned you in any connection, how do you make the judgment that that's for the purpose of influencing the election?
Well, and this is where we go back to substance over form here. And so it may be that it is a determination by the FEC to decide whether or not that was just mentioning Lisa Murkowski's name in an offhand way, or whether it really is designed to be an independent federal election related activity. So I think the design of this legislation is to, if it looks like a, what's the expression? If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it's a duck here. Let's not get too caught up in whether or not it says vote for Lisa Murkowski. And so what we're trying to do, because so much of what we've seen in these past election cycles have been, they're just trying to skate close enough. They're saying it's an issue ad, but at the end of the day, we all know what it is. It's designed to help the Republican candidate. Might not necessarily mention my name, but if it looks like election related activity, it's probably going to be determined to be so.
Tom, let me just add to that, because I agree completely with what Senator Murkowski is talking about, to put this in a little bit of a historical context. I mean, everybody knows people always, no matter what is done, try to figure out a way to get around whatever you have. And so what we've seen is every election somebody comes up with a new business model. It's sort of new and improved, and the whole goal is to basically try to get around the lax contribution and disclosure holes that exist. So historically, we went from PACs to super PACs, and now we're into the 501c4s. And if you ask me, LLCs and S corporations could well be next, and I think that's what the gentleman's question in the front row, dealt with. So what Senator Murkowski and I are talking about is getting away from that kind of model and talk about political activity, election-related political activity, no advantage to partisans. That was one of the big hang-ups before, is everybody felt, well, we'll get more out of this than the other person. We have honeycombed this debate, and that's why we sort of vetted it with the public. And we think now, Sierra Club small donors, NRA small donors, all of these people are treated alike. They essentially come under the small donor exception. And what we're hoping, I want to give the last word to Senator Murkowski, what we're hoping is that senators will see that after 10 years of a partisan back and forth on this issue, the two of us are interested in working with our colleagues. We're not saying this is the last, word, hereby pass this bill into law in the next 48 hours. We think this is something that senators on both sides of the aisle can begin to work with, and we can finally turn this around. Last word from my colleague.
Well, last word that I will offer is we have been wrestling with how to deal with the Citizens United case since that came out, and trying to understand truly what it meant. Now, some are going to look at this legislation and will argue that there is this First Amendment right to give millions of dollars anonymously for political activity, and they're not going to like this bill. They're not going to like it because they believe that it is absolutely unlimited. I think where Senator Wyden and I have come down on this argument is that we're kind of standing with Justice Scalia on this one, who said in Doe versus Reed, he says, requiring people to stand up in public for their political acts fosters civic courage, without which democracy is doomed. And I think this is where we are coming from. There is that certain First Amendment right. You can go ahead and give that $1 million donation if you wish, or you can give that $50 donation if you wish. But there will be a process, there will be a standard for disclosure, which will be fair, which will be uniform, and which I think will help reform the process. So I think we're off to a good start, and we look forward to picking up some more friends along the way.
Thanks, everybody.